It's really just like finding your community for that extra support, because it is really hard if you don't have any knowledge of marketing yourself, or not even just for an author, but any business.
Today on the podcast, we have a special guest, and I want to introduce myself. My name is Stefanie. I want to welcome you to the Table for Four Family Conversation podcast. We've had an opportunity to speak with different authors and people in their business, and it's just been such an amazing opportunity to have our special guest with us today. On this special segment, we're talking with international best-selling author Sarah Dayan Mueller. I want to welcome Sarah to the podcast, and she's going to talk about all things family, writing, balancing, because that's what just moms do, because we do everything. We are the master of all things and so many different things at one point. So welcome to the podcast, Sarah. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing good today. Yeah, a little rainy in Chicago today, but can't complain.
No complaints, right? I know I'm here actually in LA. I'm here for a podcast convention, and it's my first, so I'm like super nervous. It's been hot, so it's been great. So this is something I've been looking forward to for a bit. But Sarah, tell me a little bit about yourself. I just let the listeners know what's going on with you today.
Yeah, I'm an author. It's something that I've always wanted to do in my life. So it's kind of surreal sometimes to actually say that now I am an author.
And saying it out loud, right?
Yeah, it's nice to hear it out loud. And I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I'm married. My husband is in the military, so we're currently stationed in Chicago, and we have one son who's 3 years old. So he always keeps us busy. Oh yeah, but it's a fun age though. I like it. Yeah, and recently, actually, it's almost a year exactly that I released my latest book called Home in 100 Places, which is a historical fiction novel based on the true story of my late father's. He was actually a Jewish Egyptian spy. I grew up most of his adolescence in Egypt and found his way into a life of espionage. And then eventually he left that, moved to New York, but ultimately he lost his memories from Alzheimer's disease. My book kind of takes you throughout the whole journey of his life, from early childhood all the way until adulthood, and when he became a senior citizen. So you get to see how he transformed as a person, and how important it was for him to be around his family and keep those memories as long as he could.
Awesome. I had an opportunity to go onto your website, and it was so strange that you are a native from Brooklyn. What part of Brooklyn are you from?
Yeah, I'm from Sheepshead Bay.
Oh, no way. No way.
Yeah. Are you familiar?
I'm very familiar. I'm from East New York, Cypress Hills.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
I'm very familiar. I have
another New Yorker.
Oh, yeah. Native New Yorker. Yeah, I grew up in East New York. I've been there all my life. Currently, I'm in Queens now, living with my husband and close to Long Island. But yeah, I've been a Brooklyn girl all my life. I just want to talk a little about being a mom, being a mom of a 3.5-year-old and doing this writing, all of this. How do you even balance all of that together, just making it work?
Honestly, it's something that I have to balance every day. Day by day, it always changes based on what we have to do as a family, what he has to do. Honestly, most of my writing gets done when he's sleeping.
So when life.
Yep. When I wrote Home in 100 Places, he was, how old was he? A little over a year old. So I really wrote it when he took naps. The second he would go down for his nap, that's when I would open the computer and start working at it. And then also, of course, when he went to sleep for the night, I would do a little bit more writing. So even now too, for the most part, when he's taking naps, that's when I'm juggling the writing career. And then, of course, it's nice that my mom lives with us now. So sometimes she'll take him for a little bit and they go play and then gives me an extra hour to do something with my writing.
Right.
Yeah. And then like on the weekends when my husband's home from work, I have a little bit more wiggle room to work on it, but it's really day by day. It changes the schedule.
Just like with kids, they grow up so quickly. And by the time you know it, you said that he was like 1.5 when you started writing. He's already 3.
He was a little over 1 when I started.
Like this before you know it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
My kids, when I started like podcasting and stuff like that, I was thinking about, this is something I've always wanted to do, but I was just like too much of a chicken to do it. So it's like now I'm taking the opportunity to do it with them now. And I'm like, I wish I would have started earlier, but I'm like, this is the time for it. So you always find the time to balance and finding it. And you just make it work. Being a mom, you gotta make it work.
If it's something that you're really passionate about, you'll find time to do it one way or another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think like having that balance between writing and doing your own passion projects. Cause I know that we're not just one thing. We're not just a mom. We're not just this. We're more than one thing. So it's just like, I find it so interesting that like great writers as yourself can just do all these things and just make it seem like, we make it work.
Outside, that's what it looks like, right?
But on the outside, it looks like that. We make it look like it's working, but sometimes it could be the internal fire. We don't know that's hanging around,
Exactly, yeah.
But I wanted to talk more about how is it that you find the time to, like with your husband, you said that you guys move a lot because he is in the Marines, correct? I just want to make sure.
He's in the Marines, yeah.
So you guys travel a lot. How does that work with meeting new people and moving to a new place? How does that work though?
So we end up moving every 3 years or so. And I don't know, luckily for me, I feel like because I love to travel and I've been traveling like with my family my whole childhood and growing up, now being married to somebody in the military and having to move every few years, it's actually kind of exciting for me. A lot of people might think like, oh, it's like a daunting thing that you have to like uproot and move somewhere else. But honestly, like, luckily we've lived in a lot of like amazing places. Like we lived in San Diego, we were in California for a while, outside of DC and now in Chicago. So we've been in really big cities. So for me, it's an opportunity for me to like just learn new places, experience new things. I've met some of my closest friends just from moving around. So all in all, it's been like an amazing journey. And now luckily being a writer, I take that wherever I go. So it's very easy to be able to do that. There was a while before this, had a couple of different careers going on. I was a counselor for a while, and then I was also in HR for a while. So that was a little difficult just because I really would have to uproot like my career and move around. But now that I'm an author, it's a lot simpler because I could take that wherever we go.
Like when I always ask, like, what were you in your previous? Like I always ask moms that because you were one person before you had kids and then you were somebody else when you have them afterwards. So like, where were you in your previous life?
So previously, I actually went to graduate school to become a counselor and I worked in schools actually in Queens. So I was a counselor in Queens for a few years before we got married. And then we moved out to California. I kind of switched gears and then went into human resources. Finally, when I got pregnant, I knew I wanted to stay home for a little while. So that's kind of when I shifted and I left human resources. I've been staying home with my son. Also because COVID happened, I decided to stay home longer. At this point, I'll go back to work, maybe like at maybe an office job, like when he was at kindergarten. But in the meantime, I've been able to really focus on my writing. So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise that I shifted from so many different careers and finally landed on the one that I've actually wanted my whole life. And now, because I have the extra time now that I'm home, I can really like treat it more like a career and not just a hobby. So it's been pretty exciting to go from one career to another to actually get to where I really wanted to be.
That's so cool. I know a lot of people think badly of COVID because what it is, but I think I was able to find the things that I enjoyed more during those times when I was stuck at home. And it might sound weird, but it's like I was able to sit in my feelings, whether they were good or not, but then I was able to like figure things out. And I think that's how the podcast kind of like came to me at this point, because I've been thinking about doing it for a couple of years. But I think when I had the time and I wasn't running here or running there, doing things and running around as a mom, I actually had the time to stay home and think about it. I was like, wow, this is something that I think I really want to do. And I think you agree, like you found, yourself during that time. And then, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. Probably for you as well, like that feelings of wanting to do it has been around for a while. Yeah. And then now it's amazing that it's actually happening. Of course, COVID it's a horrible thing, but it gives you perspective, I think, of like what's really important and what you really want to do. Thankfully, both of us were able to figure that out during that time.
Right, of course. And it was so strange that it took something like that to kind of have me realize what I wanted to do. But I'm thankful in that sense. Like, I don't want to say it how it come off, but I'm thankful for that time and that opportunity to discover what it was. And I was like, oh, maybe I should try this. Maybe it might work. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But to take the chance, just to do it. But being a writer and having the time to do it, like, what are some of the things that you feel that are important, or some of the lessons you want to impart to your kids about following your passion and follow maybe those wild dreams that we have? Because I know for me, I've been a chicken when it comes to this, but like, how do you find the time to like give those lessons to your kids to follow their own passions?
I think for me, like when my son gets older, I just want to be as supportive as possible. That's how my parents were with me. Also, like they've always known that writing was something that I wanted to do. Of course, writing is a very difficult thing to do, and to actually be like successful at it is something else entirely. But they never discouraged me from doing it. And even though I found other paths to go down at first, I think because they never discouraged me and always supported me to do it, it's always continuously been part of my life. I never really pushed it off completely. Now, finally, I'm actually really taking a stab at it. When my son gets older, I think no matter what he's passionate about, I just want to be able to support him and know that he should just try. Even if he's not successful, he won't know until he tries.
Right.
Yeah. And then in cases like the two of us, right? We put ourselves out there and we tried, and now we love it. So it's always just really good for anybody to have like a good support system, no matter what they want to accomplish. So hopefully I'm going to be able to do that for him and really show him you can do it if you really want to. If you really have passion for it, you can find the 5-10 minutes of your time to like set aside every day to work on it and see what builds and what happens from there.
Absolutely. I think one of the lessons I teach my kids is to be open-minded about it. Maybe some of the things you have to try a few things before you find what you really like. My mom was like, she was a big supporter in just about everything that I wanted to do. But me being young, like I wanted to do a billion things at once. And my mom was like, you got to bring it back, got to scale it down. Let's try one thing at a time, because the energy was just too much. And I think that was the thing that is like, I have to keep reminding myself, yes, I have to be open-minded, because they might want to try whatever, a sport or whatever, and they might not like it, but at least I'm like, okay, let's try it. If you don't like it, let's move on. I don't want to be that parent to be like, oh no, it's not going to work. I'm like, let's try it first and then see if you like it. So that's like the thing that I'm trying to impart with them. So that's just something that I always wanted to do for them, and just be open-minded, not be the one to tell them no. And it's amazing that your parents were like super supportive from the beginning, and they kind of recognized like your gift from the beginning. Cause I don't think I still know my kids in that sense, because they're a little bit older. They're 10 and 12. And there's so many things, like they have their fingers in everything. Like my oldest wants to do cooking and my youngest wants to do coding. And then he talked about he wants to fly planes. And the other one talks about he wants to be like his dad and drive trains. One wants to do building and construction work. So it's just like, I'm just like, this is amazing that you have all these things. And I'm trying to like remind myself, I'm like, okay, there's a billion things. And now I'm in the same place where my mother was with me. They want to have 1,000 things to do and just trying to juggle to see what they want. But that's just something that I try to keep reminding myself of, like, they're little, they still don't know. And I still don't know. As an adult, I still don't know.
And that's the thing too, like just because we're adults doesn't mean that we're not going to find something else in the future that we're going to really fall in love with. Like it doesn't have to be just forming when you're a child. So hopefully there are other things that both of us can really enjoy in the future too. So
yeah, for sure. I think the lesson that I learned from that is that going back to school as an adult learner. So it's like in my previous life, I was working in architecture. I have my degree, and I was out there in the field working with different firms, and it was great while it was. But then I found out really wasn't for me anymore. So then I took the step into medicine, and I was just like, that's me starting all over again. But it was just more, do I start over again? How do I approach this? And then something told me, it's like, no, if this is something that you want to do, just do it. Like you always have that in the back of your mind. It was like, you can't do that. But me going to nursing school and looking forward and working into the field itself, I realized I'm like, wow, like I can really, like I can do this. Like I'm scared as it comes, but it's just like as an adult, I'm like, I don't want to reveal my age, but I'm considered an adult learner. So I have different background. I have a different diverse, what's the right term I want to use? I have all these different responsibilities that might not be the same for a younger student. So it's to my advantage or it could be to my disadvantage. But I feel like this is something that you're absolutely right. Even as an adult, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. But, but that's just the thing. This is about life in general. But
then when you look back at it, you could say things of like, you were in architecture for years and then you switched, and it's something to be proud of.
You know what? I think that I know that I'm not the type of person to always see the things in positive. And that's a me thing, not a you thing. I always try to say that to my kids. But if it didn't work out the first time, that doesn't make you a failure. That's the mindset I'm trying to tell them. Like, listen, I know it didn't work out for me. That doesn't mean it doesn't work out for you. So that's like some of the lessons I'm trying to impart to them, to say, hey, listen, it didn't work out the first time, but it's all right. I'm here to support you and remind you that it's okay. That's like really the foundation of what some of the lessons I want to, impart to my kids,
Yeah.
But I just want to jump in and talking about how did it all start for you for being a writer? Like, where did it all start in terms of like getting into poems and reading? Like, how did it all start for you becoming a writer?
Honestly, it's definitely one of those cliche things that I've been writing as long as I can remember. As a kid, last time I was in New York and I was going through like my old things like from school, I found like little short stories that I wrote when I was like in, I don't know, second grade. And I was like, wow, I actually wrote this in second grade. I was pretty impressed with myself. But it's just something that I've naturally just always loved to do, whether it was like writing in my diary or writing short stories, or in school like writing little plays. It's just something that I naturally just like to get my feelings across with. If I'm ever need to like release emotions or something, I always turn to writing. And then of course, my style and everything like changed as I got older based on like where I was in my life, what I wanted to do in terms of like my writing career. There was a while where I was doing like some freelance travel journalism, which was pretty cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right. When I was after grad school. Yeah, it was after grad school. At the time, it was really hard to find a job as a counselor in the New York City public schools.
Oh, girl.
So I said,
I get it.
As usual, right? So I stumbled across something to like do some travel journalism in the meantime. So I went for it. So my writing changed at that point. I wasn't writing fiction anymore. I was writing articles about places that I would travel. The writing has always evolved, but for some reason, I'm always drawn back to writing fiction. And writing novels has always been, when I was a kid, that was all I wanted to do, was write novels and get it published. And then hopefully one day make it into a movie or something like that. That's always been the dream. But yeah, like I said, it's always been something that was supernatural to me. I can't really
pinpoint because it's always been with you.
No, it's always been there.
It's so interesting that you took a job as a traveling journalist. Isn't that like the best of both worlds though?
It is.
Isn't it?
It was, yeah. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I should have stayed with that too. It was awesome. I got to travel to some amazing places in the United States, and I did also a lot of events in New York in the city. So it was definitely a fun time during that period.
Oh my God, traveling journalism, that takes a lot. It's so unique that the thing that I think the best thing that we're at, we don't necessarily have to go to school for.
No. Yeah. And it's like learning through a lot of trial and error. It's learning through just like being in that kind of community with other people who are passionate about the same thing that you are, learning from them, like firsthand experiences. Yeah, that's where I got most of my education in the writing field so far, is just by talking to other writers and seeing their journey and what they've been through.
That is so interesting that when I went to school, I figured I'm like, oh, this is what will give me the career that I've always wanted. But it ended up being something that I didn't want to do. So it's just like, it's so weird how we were able to find our career paths in such a different way that it's just so interesting. I feel like it's like the school of hard knocks. You learn by life lessons, not necessarily by sitting down and reading a book. Because sometimes that life experience is way more valuable than sitting in a classroom, being on Zoom for some instances and stuff like that. But as a writing process, like what has been like the hardest thing for you in terms of writing? Is there such a thing called the writer's block?
Yes, there definitely is a writer's block. I feel like I'm going through that right now in the past couple of weeks.
No way.
But
really?
Yeah.
Why?
I just feel like in a way it's kind of healthy too, though. Since I started taking this writing career, like really more as a career rather than a hobby, I've been like sitting down at my computer almost every single day trying to do something with it. And it's not just about writing. It's also about like the business side of it, which for me can be a little bit draining because I want to write, right? Like I just want to sit down at the computer and start writing. But once you actually have your books published, there's a lot of like marketing that goes into it, business stuff that goes into it. And I didn't realize that I was signing up for all of that at first. So that's been a lot of the process has been learning about that stuff. So of course, sitting down at it every single day, it gets draining after a while. So I think it's good, even if it's like kind of a writer's block or like just a marketing block completely, to just take a break for a little bit, restart in a few weeks and have like a fresher mind about things rather than being drained. And that also goes just solely for writing too. Like there's only so much that I can write at a certain time. And sometimes the ideas are all there and I sit down and everything comes out. Other times I can barely get a sentence out and I'm already done with it.
Right. So, it's like almost like an epiphany. It's like when it works, it works. But when it's not, it's not working.
It's not working at all.
It's not working at all.
So writer's block is definitely a real thing. And for me, I try to find inspiration in different ways to kind of get it going again. Music or reading or poetry. Something will always like click in me all of a sudden and I'll get inspired by something. And then all of a sudden all the ideas start flowing again. So I don't try to push it. If I sense that I can't do the best work that I could do, I'll kind of back off for a little bit and see what comes in like a week or two and start over.
Right. I think with just with the creative process, like how have you been able to combine all of that with the marketing? Because I'm still new to it. So I'm like, I barely know anything. So I'm learning as I go along. But how do you even manage? Do you have a team that helps you? Do you have like experts that, because I still don't know.
Yeah, it's really just a lot of like putting yourself out there and figuring it out as you go. I've actually found that like joining certain Facebook groups, like for authors marketing, that kind of information has been really helpful. And talking to other people to get ideas of like what they're doing has been helpful. I've been doing it my own, but I do have a few friends who are in the media industry in different different parts of the media industry that kind of can help me out here and there with ideas, which has been super helpful. But yeah, it's really just like finding your community for that extra support, because it is really hard if you don't have any knowledge of marketing yourself, or not even just for an author, but any business, like for you, for podcasts. Yeah. If you don't have that kind of knowledge, you really just have to learn it. Sometimes it's daunting to see like, where do you even begin? But finding a community, I think, has been really helpful, just to bounce around ideas and see what other people have been doing too.
I think that's by how we met. We met through community. Facebook. And it was just like, I was like super surprised. Like you even replied to me and I was just like, oh, she replied to me. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Can we? So that was like something to me. And I was just like, I was like super scared to do it. I'm like, she's probably going to say no, but then I got a yes. And I was like, yes. Yeah. I was like, it worked out for me. So
that's why you never know, right? Like you never know who you're going to talk to, what kind of opportunities are going to come up, like just from joining Facebook groups, whether it's like talking to other authors, talking to other people in media and podcasts and stuff. I've stumbled upon like a lot of crazy opportunities so far within this, like the first year that I'm doing this, that I would not have ever imagined beforehand. So it's like, you never know who you're going to meet and talk to.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool too.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. And it's just like I think the most difficult part is just being confident. Like sometimes I know that I lack of it. It might not seem like it, but but it's a thing of confidence is just really trying to, again, like you mentioned before, to put yourself out there. But my fear is like always like, if I put myself out there, I'm up for scrutiny, I'm up for all these negativity, and I'm just trying to like, oh, do I want to do that? Am I setting myself up? But I think it's an incredible thing that you are doing this. This career path is like so amazing. I was able to get in touch with you through a Facebook interconnection. I was just like, oh, this is amazing. But just thinking about being a writer and thinking about your process, have you done like any traveling for your book? Like, have you done any research for your books, any of the books?
Yeah. So Home in 100 Places actually takes place in a lot of different places. So I've been fortunate enough to travel to some of those locations. Like I mentioned before, I used to travel a lot with my parents growing up. My dad's job had him move around a little bit. I was born in New York, but we moved to Turkey for a couple of years when I was little. We visited places like London and Paris, the Philippines, and all of these places come up in the story. So fortunately, I have been able to travel to these places before I wrote this book. So I still have the memories of all these locations. So it was nice to be able to write it. And that's kind of also where my travel journalism comes in, because I really did find another part of my writing that I love to do is to write about different locations around the world, combining my love for travel and writing together. So I was able to do that in this book too. So it's been fun to be able to like showcase all these places that I love and show it to other people, and they can kind of get a sense of like the place, even if they haven't been there before.
That's amazing. Like, I know that when, I don't know if it's called the travel bug, or it's like, I've always had this thing, like if I had an opportunity to go somewhere, where would I go? So it's just like, now that I have the opportunity to like, this is my first time in LA. I've never been to LA.
Oh, yeah.
This is my first time. I'm like, this is so exciting for me. It's something new, something different. And I think that's something that I keep looking forward to. So, yeah. But it's just, if you had to think of any other place you haven't been, because you're well-traveled, where would you want to go?
Egypt. For sure, Egypt.
Yeah. From the story where Raymond and his father on the motorcycle visiting the pyramids.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because he grew up mostly in Cairo, and my family is from there, and I've never been. So it's always been on my bucket list, like high on my bucket list to go. I just never have had the chance to. So that's definitely, especially now after writing this book, and I did so much more research on it just from writing the story. I definitely want to go there and see the places that he went to, and where my family used to live and all of that. I think it would be amazing.
That is so awesome. I would love to hear a little bit more. If you want to just dive in a little bit and talk about your book, not too much, because I don't give it away. But tell us a little bit about the book and just how it just developed for you. I mean, I've been able to dive into the book, and I would just like to know, let the listeners know where they can find the book and just telling us a little bit about the book itself.
Yeah, this book is called Home in 100 Places. Like I mentioned before, it's about the story of my dad's life. And that's something that I've always wanted to write. Like my family has always told me, like, oh, he's had such an interesting life. Like you have to write it, because everybody knew that I like to write. They said, you have to write it. And I've been hearing this since I was like a teenager and I never got around. Yeah. I've never got around to do it, but then I finally did. And it was actually when he was in his later stages of Alzheimer's disease that I started writing it. So basically, the whole story takes you from his early childhood. He was actually born in Haiti and he moved to Egypt. And you see how he transformed as a person. He was a spy for a while in Egypt, but was able to escape that lifestyle. And he eventually moved to New York City, where he totally, like what we were saying, switched careers completely, went into banking out of all things. And then from there, he continued to travel around the world. His job was taking him places. But during his life as a spy in Egypt, one of his cousins was involved also, and they lost touch. So throughout the whole book, you kind of travel around the world as he's kind of trying to find his cousin. And then Alzheimer's starts to kick in and he's starting to lose his memory. So you kind of see, is he going to find his cousin before he loses memories of him? Are they going to be reunited? So yeah, it was really like, I don't know, such a, I think, a wonderful process for me, because I wrote the majority of it when he was, like I said, in the late stages of Alzheimer's disease. Luckily, we were able to discuss some things and he still had certain memories at that point. And then unfortunately, he passed away during that whole writing process.
Oh, no.
And I published it a couple of months after he passed away. You know, kind of coming full circle, that now I'm able to share his story with everyone is really special to me. So yeah, that's a little bit about the book. And it's mostly, I would say 90% true events. There's a touch of fiction in it too.
That's great. I just thought about what you mentioned before, that he had Alzheimer's. My grandfather, he had Alzheimer's as well. And I think that was one of the other reasons why, like, I resonated with you and I connected in that way, because seeing him in his decline as well, it was difficult to see him. And it was so strange, because he wasn't the same person who I was when I saw him growing up to to the later stages when he had Alzheimer's. So that, to me, it kind of, like, that's how I felt like we related and we connected in that way. And I thought it was such a special story just to have that to bring up about mental disease. And I know that with Alzheimer's in itself, like, the understanding of it is really about making this writing about him was almost like a dedication, I believe, right? This was like, did it work for you as therapy, working through?
It did. It definitely did. Yeah, especially because of when I wrote it. If I wrote this story like 5-10 years ago, I don't think it would have been, just because I was writing it while he was going through that process of that stage of his life. It shifted how I wrote it. So yeah, it was definitely like a therapeutic process, especially because I was still able to talk to him about certain things while I was writing it, which was really nice. Yeah.
And with that, what were some of the best memories during that time that you've had with him?
I think really just like, if I had questions about like his childhood, growing up in Haiti, growing up in Egypt, I was able to ask him questions about it. And he did have like certain memories still that were pretty clear about that time in his life. So it was just really nice to get in between everything that was going on with Alzheimer's. And yeah, he was losing a lot of his memories. It was still nice to see that he still had some, and the ones that he did have were really clear. And it was like the person that I grew up with again. Like you said, like, yeah, Alzheimer's definitely changes a person, like their personality in terms of like mood swings. And aside from the forgetfulness, sometimes people could be angry a lot or sad, just a different personality, which is like, not a lot of people know that happens with Alzheimer's disease. So getting those moments of him, how I know him, was really, really nice.
And just like kind of like going back to talking about those stories and just like such an amazing time that you guys had together. And was there any of that time, was there any advice your dad gave you during that time in terms of like your writing or just in terms of life? Was there anything that he said to you that kind of like, wow, dad, okay, thank you?
I think just no matter what, he was just always continuously supportive. I don't think he said anything specifically that like was different, but that was also the nice part about it, is that his attitude towards my writing never changed his whole life. Even towards the end, he was still really supportive of what I wanted to do. So it was nice to like still be able to hold on to that with him.
For sure, for sure. And thinking about how Alzheimer's is it's such a different thing for everybody. And it's like, I know that for you, what was the point of letting our listeners know that just because you have Alzheimer's, that they should carry the memories of that person and we shouldn't change how we think of them? Because I know that's something that was very important to you to mention about that.
Yeah, I think just from my experience with my dad and his experience with Alzheimer's, I really realized that somebody who's diagnosed with something like that, it might become like something that defines them later on in life, but I don't see that as the case. I see that as like you have to really remember everything that happened before a person's diagnosis with Alzheimer's. You really have to think like, oh, this person really had an amazing life. And just because they have something towards the end of their life, like Alzheimer's, doesn't mean that's what really defines them as a person. There's so much else that happened before the diagnosis. And I really want people to like be aware of that. Maybe they have loved ones who are going through it or they're caregivers for somebody, just to remember all the good times before it.
Right. And not focus on not necessarily the bad things, but it's just like we get so caught up on making sure we take care of them in these last stages that we want to make sure that they're everything that we do is in their best interest. But it's so interesting that you say that we are not defined by our diagnosis, and it's not, because there's other neurodegenerative diseases that are out there, dementia, and there's other disabilities that do not define the person that you are. I know that there's people that are more than capable of doing amazing things, even with other different disabilities or different aspects of, health that can interfere with them in that process. But just another question about how did it come to be that you were in this field of writing and journalism and traveling? Like, how were you able to connect with the writers, like other writers, and to your listeners? How were you able to find that connection between them? I know it's difficult for me trying to find something that I can relate to, but how were you able to do that through your writing?
Well, honestly, it's not something that like I sought out necessarily. It's just something that there were things that I wanted to write and I wanted to put it out there. And if other people were able to connect with it, that was good. If nobody was able to connect with it, then the writing would be more for me and my family.
Right.
Yeah. Luckily, though, there's been a lot of people who have been able to connect to what I write. This story, though, is not just about Alzheimer's. So, of course, I had some readers who have family members or loved ones who have Alzheimer's that were able to connect with the story because of that component. But there's also a lot of people who love to travel and they love to read the story because of the travel component to it.
Right.
And one of like a theme throughout the story is about family. So I want to say the majority of people can connect somehow to that kind of story. This book, I really wrote it firstly for myself and my family because it is my family's story. And now it's more like the cherry on top that other people are able to enjoy it as well.
Absolutely. And in closing, I just wanted to know if there was anything that you could talk about, anything in particular, or any new topic, anything you could talk about, what would you talk about? Like if there's anything new or anything different to write about in particular.
To write about, like, I really think from my experience writing this book, I really realized how much I like to write about travel. Even though I did do like travel journalism in the past, because this story takes place in so many different locations, And because I do love to travel, I really realized that like putting it together was an amazing experience for me. So in the future, I actually want to write possibly a series, a book series about somebody who travels and get to showcase all these places around the world that I love. And hopefully it'll resonate with other people too.
That sounds interesting. And I think that kind of goes into like what are some of the new works that you are doing now? Like, what do you have that's cooking? What is in the progress? Like, right now?
So I actually did get started on that series, which is currently what I have my writer's block on. But yeah, that one is going to be a little bit more lighthearted, and it actually focuses on somebody who is a travel journalist like I was before. So she starts her own business doing that and like takes a leap of faith and starts traveling around the world doing that. So it's going to be a more like lighthearted romantic comedy type of thing, but I'm pretty excited about it because like I said, I really enjoy writing about travel and like different places around the world. So I'm excited about that.
And then that's so amazing.
And I do have another story that I think I've written maybe like 75% of it. And I kind of put it on the back burner for a little bit, but it's more of a psychological thriller. So totally different. And it's called The Lies on Their Lips. It's basically about a woman who she has a strained relationship with her twin brother. She is actually a sketch artist for the NYPD.
Oh,
and
wow.
she sketches, there was a crime that came through and she sketches the suspect and it ended up being the twin brother. So,
no way.
So she's stuck with deciding morally what she should do, if she should turn him in or if she should try to help him. But there's, of course, a lot of lying going on throughout the whole story. So you never know who's really telling the truth.
Who's telling the truth, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So that's my couple of projects in the works currently.
You have a lot going on. And again, you're making it work. You're making it work. I mean, This conversation has been great. I hope you're having a good time. You know, I'm having an amazing time. But
I am for sure.
Oh, great. That makes me happy. I have one more question for you. Mm-hmm. If you can turn any of your books into a movie, who would you want to be in that book, in that movie?
Oh, that's a tough one. Of course, I would want Home in 100 Places to become a movie.
For sure. Speaking it out there, throwing it out there. It's going to happen.
Yeah, throwing it out into the universe, right? Honestly, I can't think of any actors off the top of my head, but I would want to do it justice in terms of the story is very diverse. Like I come from a very diverse background. I'm mixed Asian, Filipino, and Egyptian. So I think it would be really nice to have that kind of representation in the movie of like somebody who is mixed background and really do it justice in terms of like finding people who know the cultures that show up in the story.
That would be amazing. And it'll be such a great story and a great film in itself. I'm just thinking about how we still need to have representation. And it's so amazing that you as a writer, that you represent so many between mom and dad and learning all these different things about traveling the world. So I think it'd be super cool just to have that into the works. But again, we're throwing it out to the universe, throwing it out there. But Sarah, I want to thank you for being on the podcast with me. I want to thank you for taking this time and talking with me. And I just had an amazing time with you. I can't stress enough that this has been such an amazing opportunity for me to be able to sit down and talk to you and just have a genuine conversation. I mean, I'm like super elated that you said yes to me and that we have this opportunity, to speak with each other. So I want to really thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really enjoyed it too.
I'm so glad that you had an opportunity to come and talk to me, but can you tell the listeners where they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, sarahdayanmueller.com. And then on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, all same handle, Sarah Dayan Mueller.
Perfect. So I'll just make sure that once we start getting everything ready, we're going to make sure you guys follow her. Make sure you purchase your book. I purchased my book on Amazon on the Kindle app. So you could just go ahead and purchase that book and read it right away. Again, don't forget to follow, like, and share on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram at Table for Four. And don't forget to listen and follow those new episodes that we have premiering coming up. Sarah's episode is going to be out on YouTube and on Spotify in the next incoming, but keeping it busy, and I can't thank you enough. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you again, Sarah, for being on the podcast with us.
Thank you.